I was the only one at my husband's funeral, not our son, not our daughter, not even one of the grandkids. It was just me standing by his coffin while the cold wind whipped through the courtyard like it couldn't wait to leave. The funeral director looked so uncomfortable. He kept glancing between the empty seats in my face. He cleared his throat a couple of times. "Should we wait a few more minutes, Mrs. Mitchell?" "No," I said, "start." Robert would have hated a delay. He was always on time, even in his last days, taking his pills by the clock, watching the evening news at 6 sharp. He'd line up his slippers side by side before bed, a man of habit, a man of dignity, and now he was being buried all alone. I sat in the front row, all 5 chairs around me empty. The pastor just read the words. There was no feeling behind them. The flowers were too bright, the casket was too polished. I just kept thinking how Robert would have laughed at all the fuss. And then he'd have looked around frowning, asking where the hell the kids were. So where were they? I got a text that morning. Our son Brandon sent a one-liner. "Sorry, Mom, something came up. Can't make it." No explanation, no phone call. I could just picture him at his office, or more likely on a golf course, with clients acting like he didn't feel a thing. Acting like his own father's death was just a small inconvenience in his busy schedule. Our daughter Ashley didn't even text. She'd left a voicemail 2 days ago, all breezy and casual. "Mom, I really can't cancel my nail appointment. And you know how anxious I get with reschedules? Tell Dad I'll visit him next week." As if he was just going to wait around. After the service, I walked alone behind the pallbearers. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't grieving. I'd been grieving for months already. It was because there's a kind of sadness that's so deep. It just sits inside you like a heavy weight, and on that day, I was completely buried under it. The cemetery was practically empty. An old groundskeeper watched from a distance, just leaning on his shovel. They lowered the coffin and whispered the prayers. Then it was over. I stood there for a while after the others left. My heels were sinking into the soft dirt, and I could feel the wind pulling at my coat. The headstone would be put in later. For now, there was just a simple plaque with Robert's name, Robert Mitchell, beloved husband, father, forgotten. That word forgotten just stuck in my head. Back at home, the silence was deafening. His slippers were still side by side the TV remote right where he left it. I stared at it for a long time. Then I went into the kitchen. I opened a bottle of wine, a good one I always saved for guests, and poured myself a glass. I took out my phone and opened Instagram. I don't go on it much, but something told me to look. Ashley's profile was public. Of course. She had posted a picture 2 hours ago of her and 3 friends holding drinks laughing. The caption said, "Girls brunch, bottomless mimosas, living our best lives." And Brandon had posted too, a picture of the 9th hole. His new driver was glinting in the sun. Killer swing, perfect weather, deals made. I stared at the screen until it all went blurry. Then I turned off the phone, took another sip of wine, and just stared at the family photo on the wall. That's Robert and me on our 40th anniversary right by the rose bushes he planted himself. They used to be covered in red blooms. Now they're just bare sticks. Tomorrow, I'm calling the lawyer. I'm going to make these changes quietly with the same dignity Robert always had. Because if I was the only one who showed up for his funeral, then I'm going to be the only one who carries out his last wishes, and theirs. That night, I just sat in our kitchen alone. It's the same room where Robert used to peel apples like he was a surgeon, cutting them into perfect little slices on a plate. He always gave me the best piece. The one with the most sunshine, that's what he'd call it. Now the fruit bowl's just sitting there with a couple of pears getting all soft and gross. The silence wasn't new. Robert was gone for almost 2 weeks before the funeral even happened, and I was already learning what it felt like to be alone. But tonight it just felt heavier, louder, and a whole lot meaner. I couldn't stop thinking about those empty chairs, about Ashley's text or the one she never sent. I raised a daughter who could just sit at a brunch table while her own father was being buried. Was it my fault? Or is there something broken inside of her that you just can't fix? Brandon's text was still on my phone. No punctuation, no kindness, just a flat-out no in black and white. Something came up. Was he embarrassed? Did he just not care? Or was it just that kind of thoughtless cruelty you don't even see? I poured another glass of wine. I wasn't sad anymore. I was seeing things clearly. I walked down the hall to our bedroom and opened the top drawer of Robert's desk. His stuff was still neat and tidy. Envelopes, extra keys, an old stamp collection. I reached behind the files and grabbed the folder I kept hidden way in the back. It was thin, neat, and held together with a rubber band. The label said, Estate. Inside were copies of our will, a list of who gets what, and all our instructions for the house, the car, the bank accounts, even the antique clock Robert's grandfather brought from Dublin. We had our lawyer check everything 2 years ago, thinking of everyone. I sat down on the edge of our bed and opened the file. Brandon was listed for half of the main investment account, the one with nearly $300,000 in it. Money we saved our whole lives by being careful. He and Ashley were both supposed to get the house. They were even down for the lake cabin, the one they never visit, but always remember to call about when the tax bill shows up. I held the papers in my hand and my fingers started shaking. It wasn't because I'm old, it was something else. Betrayal. It's a feeling you can feel in your chest, and it was pounding in my ears. I got up and went to the closet, pulled down a storage bin. It was filled with old photos. Family parties, birthdays, holidays, Robert holding the kids when they were little, me laughing on the front porch, Ashley grabbing my sleeve, Brandon fast asleep in Robert's lap with a book open on his chest. We really were a family once, and I guess I was just a fool for not seeing how far we'd drifted. Maybe love doesn't just blow up in a big fight. Maybe it just fades away slowly like old wallpaper in the sun. So quiet that you don't notice until one day you can't even recognize the pattern anymore. I saw a picture of Robert and Brandon fishing. Brandon looked about 12. Robert had his arm wrapped around him, pointing at something in the water with this big, gentle smile. Robert deserved better than an empty funeral. I put the picture back down. Then I grabbed the phone. It was almost midnight, but I didn't care. I called our lawyer, Michael Harrison. It went straight to voicemail just like I thought it would. I left a message anyway. Michael, it's Dorothy Mitchell. I need to change my will and it's urgent. Call me first thing. I hung up and just stood there by the window for a while. The moon was shining on the rose bushes outside. They'd started dying after Robert passed away, but not because I'd let them go. It was like they were sad too. I knew I needed to cut them back so they could grow again. But not tonight. Tonight, I'd just let the dead petals fall. Tomorrow, I was going to start cutting out everything that didn't belong anymore. The lawyer's office smelled like old books and some kind of polish. It was one of those places that felt heavy and quiet. Michael Harrison knew me and Robert for over 30 years. He was there for our first mortgage, Robert's business license, the papers for the lake house, and finally, our will. He was trustworthy, sharp, and just like me, he was sick of people who only smile when they want something. He looked up when I walked in, getting up from his chair. He looked a little surprised. "Dorothy," he said, buttoning his jacket. "You're here early." "It couldn't wait," I said, and sat down in the leather chair across from him. My coat still smelled a little like the garden. I'd been out cutting the dead roses that morning before I even had breakfast. Cutting them back always calmed me down. There's something real about getting rid of what's not useful anymore. "I got your message," Michael said as he sat down. "You said you want to change your will." "Yes," I said. "I want Brandon and Ashley cut out completely." He stopped for a second. He wasn't shocked, he was just being careful. "Are you sure?" I looked right at him. I buried my husband by myself. Our kids didn't show up. They didn't even call or send a flower. They were too busy. I put my hands on the table, real calm. They don't deserve a single penny. Michael just nodded slowly. "Okay then, we'll write up a new amendment. You want them out of everything?" "Yes, the bank accounts, the house. The cabin, all of it." "Got it." He opened a notepad and started writing nice and neat. "Do you want to leave everything to someone else?" I immediately thought of Tyler, my grandson, Ashley's son. He's the only one who ever comes to visit just to visit. He mowed my lawn last July and I didn't even have to ask. He just said I shouldn't be out in the heat. He brings me books from the library and asks me what I think. He even told me once, "Grandma, I like talking to you more than kids my own age." I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. "I want to set up a trust for Tyler. I want him to get the house, the cabin, and everything else, but it needs to be set up right, so his parents can't touch it." "We can do that," Michael said. He was all business, which I liked. "We'll set up an irrevocable trust in Tyler's name. He won't be able to touch the main part until he's 30, except for school or medical bills. Does that sound okay to you?" "Sounds perfect," I said. We spent the next hour going over all the details, paper by paper. I didn't even blink. When you've buried your husband yourself and stood at his open grave with no kids around, a pile of legal papers isn't going to scare you. After that, the little things just don't matter. When we were almost finished, Michael looked up at me. "Dorothy, I have to say most people your age don't do this so cleanly. Most want to forgive to just keep the peace." I answered softly, "I've kept the peace for 80 years. And it buried me a long time before it buried Robert." He didn't ask another question after that. When I finally left the office, sunlight was stretching across the sidewalk. I stood outside for a second, just letting the October air hit my face. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Done waiting for my kids to turn into people they never planned on being. Done confusing what I had to do with love. Done giving everything I had and only getting silence in return. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I walked to my car. The leather seat felt warm. I just sat there for a minute with my hands on the steering wheel, watching people rush by on the street. A woman and her daughter walked past holding hands laughing about something. I didn't feel any envy. I just noticed it, that's all. It felt like an old song I used to love but never play anymore. That night I slept without the TV on. I didn't read a book, and I didn't have Robert's old sweater folded next to me like I always did. The house was quiet, but the silence didn't hurt anymore. Not now. The file cabinet in the hall has 3 drawers. Robert had labeled them all in his neat handwriting. House, taxes, family. That last one was the one I needed. I opened it slowly, and the metal drawer groaned a little. Inside were stacks of folders, piles of receipts, copies of checks, bank letters, even old Christmas cards squeezed in with loan papers. I'd saved everything. Not because I was obsessed, but because I believe in having the facts straight. Paper doesn't lie, and that drawer was full of hard truths. I sat down at the kitchen table and put the folder labeled Brandon Education and Business to the side. Then I opened Ashley's marked Home and Lifestyle. The writing was mine, neater years ago, but still easy to read. I looked at a $15,000 check from 2003. Ashley's wedding. "It's just a small ceremony, Mom," she'd said. "We just want a nice place." That nice place had chandeliers and lobster rolls, then a $7,800 transfer in 2007. The roof's leaking, Mom. The baby's crib got all wet. I paid it that same hour. Next was $12,000 in 2011, new braces for Tyler. $5,000 in 2013. He wants to go to a summer robotics camp. It's a really big deal, Mom. Then a year later, Ashley called me crying. Her husband got laid off. I sent another $20,000. I didn't ask a single question. "You always save us," she whispered over the phone. "We don't know what we'd do without you," and I actually believed her. Brandon's folder was even thicker, $25,000 for some sure-thing startup that went belly up in less than 6 months. Robert told me not to send it, but I did it anyway. After that, a used car, a down payment. 3 semesters of grad school. I paid the hospital bills when his second little girl was born, and insurance when she first broke her arm. When Brandon got behind on his taxes, I just wrote a check and didn't tell a soul. Looking at it all now, line after line, I wondered when I turned into their personal ATM. Or maybe I'd always been that way, and I was just always too willing to be there to catch their fall. Not once, not a single time did they ever turn down my help, but they turned down saying goodbye to their own father, and that's not something money could fix. I put the files back in the cabinet, all except for one. I kept the envelope that said Tyler. Inside was a note he'd written when he was 11, sloppy pencil folded in half. "Grandma Dorothy, thank you for teaching me to make pancakes. I think you're very wise and funny. One day I'll take care of you like you take care of me." I held that piece of paper for a long time. He was 19 now. I didn't know if he even remembered writing that letter or if it still meant anything to him. But it did to me. I had always meant to be fair, to divide everything up equally. That's what people always say, isn't it? Be fair. Don't play favorites. But what if fair wasn't the same as equal? What if fair meant giving it all to the one person who saw you? Not as a bank, but as an actual person. Robert used to say, a legacy isn't what you leave, it's who you leave it to. I always thought he meant money. Now I know he didn't. The house felt smaller that day. Not because it had changed, but because I was starting to see it without all the memories getting in the way. For years, I kept every little trinket the kids ever gave me. Handmade cards, macaroni picture frames, glittery mugs. But love isn't in things, it's in what people do. And lately their actions had all said the same thing. You're useful, but not valuable. That afternoon, I packed up 3 cardboard boxes with the kids' old gifts. Not to throw them away, not yet, just to make some space. Space for something else to grow. That night, I didn't drink any wine. I didn't need the courage anymore. I made tea. The real stuff, the kind Robert liked. Loose leaves in a proper pot steeped just right. I carried it to the living room and sat in the quiet. My legs tucked under me, the smell of bergamot soft in the air. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt peace starting to settle in. The call came that afternoon, just a voice I hadn't heard in months, soft almost like he was nervous. "Grandma?" It was Tyler. I closed the ledger in front of me. I'd been going over the utility bills, getting ready to shut off services at the lake cabin. The one Brandon never used but always called an asset. It wasn't an asset anymore, at least not to him. "Hello, darling," I said, trying my best to keep my voice steady. "Is everything all right?" A pause. Then, I heard about Grandpa. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner." I waited not because I wanted to make him feel bad, but because I needed to hear if his next words were real. I didn't know he passed until 2 days ago. Tyler said quickly. Mom never told me. She said he was sick, but not that he was gone. I sat perfectly still. He passed almost 3 weeks ago, Tyler. I know, he whispered. I'm sorry. For a moment, we were both just silent. I heard something in his silence, though. It wasn't just guilt, it was grief, the real kind, the kind you can't fake. I wanted to come see you, he added, if that's okay. I let out a breath. Of course it's okay. He showed up an hour later, taller than I remembered and looking like he needed a shave. He smelled a little like clean laundry and a lot like stress. He hugged me awkwardly like a kid who's not sure if he's still welcome. At first, it was just one arm real hesitant, but then he hugged me for real when he felt me hug back. I didn't let go. We sat down in the living room. I poured him some lemonade and he looked around like the place was the same but totally different. I guess that's what grief feels like. You recognize everything, but it all feels like it's from another world. I missed his funeral, he said, and I'm never going to forgive myself for it. It wasn't your choice to miss it, I said softly. He really looked at me then. Did Mom really not show up? I just nodded once. He didn't say anything. He just stared down at the coaster under his glass, rubbing his thumb along the worn-out edge. She told me they had to work, he said after a minute, that it was all taken care of. I should have known. You know I want to do something, he said, sitting up straighter. For him, for you, anything. You already are, I told him. You're here. He didn't look convinced. I paused, then got up and came back with a big envelope. Inside were the trust papers. They weren't signed or filed yet, but they were the real deal. I hadn't taken them to the bank. I wanted to see Tyler's face first. I handed the folder to him. He opened it, looking confused, read the first few lines, then looked up at me, shocked. Grandma, what is this? My plan, I said simply. This is everything. The house, the cabin, even the savings accounts. Okay, but why me? His voice cracked. Why not Mom or Uncle Brandon? I could have said a lot of things. I could have brought up how they were never there, how cruel they were, all their parties and excuses, but I chose a simpler truth. Because you're the only one who came back without me having to ask. He stared at the papers, then set them down gently on the table like he was afraid they'd break. I don't know what to say, he mumbled. You don't have to say anything. Just remember who you are, and remember what real love looks like. His eyes were wet. He wiped them on his sleeve just like he used to when he was a little boy trying to hide that he was crying. We sat there for a long time, not saying a word, just being there together. It was just like how Robert and I used to sit in the evenings. We were two people who didn't need words to feel close. As he was leaving, Tyler turned to me at the door. If I come over next weekend, can we make pancakes again? I smiled a real smile for the first time in days. We'll even use the good syrup. Ashley showed up the next morning. I knew she would. Not because she missed me and not because she was sad. It was because I'd stopped answering her texts. She pulled up without warning, her black SUV spitting gravel because she was going too fast. Like she was late for somewhere more important. She didn't bother knocking, just walked right in like she used to. Like she still owned the place. Mom, she said, dropping her huge purse on the hall table, I've been trying to reach you. I didn't get up. I was folding laundry nice and slow, deliberately matching socks like it was the most important thing in the world. I've been busy, I said. She scoffed. Busy with what? I didn't answer. She just walked into the kitchen and got herself a glass of water without asking, and leaned on the counter like she owned the place. So, she said, is it true? I just looked at her. What are you talking about? She tapped her nails on the counter. Tyler said you're changing the will, cutting me and Brandon out. I finished folding a shirt and put it in the basket. I am, yes. Ashley just laughed a short, bitter sound. Are you serious? After everything we've done for you? I finally looked right at her, my hands still. You didn't come to your father's funeral, Ashley. You didn't send flowers. You didn't call. You didn't even ask. I had an appointment. Yeah, I cut her off. Your nails and then brunch. I saw the pictures. She blinked, but she didn't deny it. You want to talk about what you've done for me? I went on. You sent me grocery lists, bills, school payments, mortgage requests, and I paid them, quietly, without asking for a single thing. That's what family does, she snapped back. They help each other. No, I said softly. That's what a mother does, and I did it for years. She went quiet. Your father built this house with his own 2 hands. He didn't have much, but he had pride. He taught you that respect is about what you do, not what you say. And you couldn't give him 2 hours to say goodbye. That wasn't fair, was it? She just stared at the floor. So you're really cutting us out, just like that? No, I said not just like that. I spent the last 20 years giving and getting nothing back. I buried my husband all by myself. I sat by his grave and waited for my children. They never came. That's not just like that. That's a lifetime. She crossed her arms, trying to look tough, but her mouth was a tight line. You're punishing us. No, Ashley. I'm freeing myself, and I'm giving everything to Tyler. She laughed again, higher this time. He's a kid. What does he know about responsibility? He knows how to show up. The silence after that was heavy. I thought she might cry. I thought she might scream. Instead, she just picked up her bag. Well, she said, sliding on her sunglasses, I hope this makes you feel powerful. No, I said, my voice steady. It makes me feel at peace. She left without saying another word. I waited until I heard the car drive away. Then I picked up the trust papers from the dining table and put them with the folded laundry. Later that evening, I found a letter on the doorstep. No stamp or envelope, just a creased and smudged piece of paper. You don't understand what it's like to juggle everything. We tried our best. Maybe we failed, but cutting us out like this isn't the answer. I read it over twice, then folded it in half and shoved it in the junk drawer, because that's what it was now. Just another piece of paper. Too little, way too late. Brandon came the next day. He didn't barge in like Ashley. He knocked twice, waited, then knocked again. I opened the door slowly. I already knew he wouldn't be alone, and he wasn't. Behind him stood Meredith, his wife, with her usual stiff smile and a scarf that was too expensive for the weather. She nodded at me like I was a stranger she was doing a favor for. Mom, Brandon said, his voice calm like he'd practiced it. Can we come in? I just stepped aside. He looked around the house like he was a stranger in his own past. I showed them into the living room. They kept their coats on. Ashley called me, he said, and Tyler too. I figured they would. He cleared his throat. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I just stayed quiet. Meredith crossed her legs and the big diamond on her hand flashed in the light. We know this is a hard time, May. Emotions are high after a death. I looked right at her. You didn't come to his funeral either. She just blinked. I had a client dinner, a really important deal. It was international. Brandon shifted in his seat. Mom, look, I should have called. I should have come, but I didn't know how. I thought maybe. No. I cut him off. You thought if you ignored it long enough, it would just become someone else's problem. He looked away. I waited. I went on. I sat alone in the house your father built with his own 2 hands while they buried him. And not a single one of you showed up. Brandon started to speak, but Meredith put a hand on his knee. A warning. Let her finish. We get that you're upset, she said, and it's your right to change the will. But let's be realistic about this. Tyler's just a kid. He's 19. Yes, but he's got no experience. He doesn't know how to handle a trust fund or a property. He could be taken advantage of. I just raised an eyebrow. By who? Meredith didn't even flinch. By people who know he just came into money. Like you, I thought. Brandon tried again. Mom, I know I let you down. I know I haven't been a good son, but you have to admit this is going too far. No, I said quietly. What's too far is abandoning your own father. What's too far is acting like the people who raised you can just be thrown away. He swallowed hard. So that's it. You're just cutting us out. You already cut yourselves out. I'm just making it official. Meredith stood up. This could get messy, May, legally. I met her stare. No, it won't. The paperwork is solid. My lawyer is very good. And I've had a lot of time to think. Brandon looked older than I remembered, thinner. His eyes looked empty. I thought you were a forgiving person. I am, I said, but forgiveness doesn't mean you get a key to my house. They didn't say anything else after that. They got up, gave me a fake thank you, and left. The second the door closed, my hands started to shake. It wasn't fear, it wasn't doubt, it was relief. I just sat there by the window for a long time, watching the sun go down. The rose bushes were almost bare. Winter was coming. Robert would have said, they'll bloom again. And they will, I thought, just not for everyone. The bank smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet money. The kind of place where nobody ever raised their voice. I hadn't been in there for almost a year, but they knew me. Mrs. Mitchell, the receptionist said, standing up right away. Mr. Jansen will be right with you. I gave a polite nod and waited by the big windows looking out onto Main Street. Outside, people were rushing around, heads down, running errands. But inside, the world felt completely still, like something important was always on the verge of happening. Mr. Jansen, Richard came out a minute later looking sharp as ever in his fancy suit. He looked like the kind of man who'd never spilled a thing in his life. May, he greeted me with a warm smile, shaking my hand. Your message caught me off guard. Good, I said. Surprises are good. He gave me a nervous smile and led me to his office. Glass walls, a walnut desk, and a single photo of his dog. Robert would have liked that. The only honest face in a room full of suits. "I understand you're looking to make a few changes," he said, opening my account file. "I already made them," I told him. "I'm here to make sure they stick." He glanced over the notes, his eyebrows shooting up as he read. "You've cut off all link transfers, removed Brandon and Ashley as beneficiaries, and put everything in an irrevocable trust for Tyler. That's a major move." "I'm a major woman," I said. He chuckled. "Yes, you are." I leaned in. "I want this airtight Richard, no loopholes, no appeals, and no family showing up in 5 years to twist his arm when they realize what they've lost. We can definitely structure the trust that way. The payouts will be controlled, tied to school housing. Or healthcare until he's 30. After that, he gets full control, but it's still protected. Do you want a co-trustee?" "No," I said. "Tyler can hire an advisor if he wants one, but the decisions are his. I trust him more than I trust lawyers." That wasn't a shot at Richard, it was just a fact. He adjusted his glasses. "You get that this can't be easily undone, right?" "I don't want it undone. We went through it all. Signatures, dates, final checks." It felt like I was building something. Not a house or a business, but something quieter, stronger. A line that wouldn't get blurred by guilt or get soft with time. Before I left, Richard folded his hands on the desk. "May, if you don't mind me asking, and please tell me if it's none of my business, but are you doing this out of anger?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "I'm doing it out of clarity." He nodded slowly. "That's rare." "No," I said again, softer this time. "It's just overdue." When I stepped back out into the daylight, it felt different, cleaner, lighter somehow. Across the street was the coffee shop Robert and I used to go to. I hadn't been there in years. The place had changed. The staff was younger. The music was louder, but I went in and ordered a cappuccino anyway. I sat by the window watching the street. A woman in her 30s walked by, pushing a stroller, her coat flapping in the wind. She looked tired, but determined, and familiar. I sipped my coffee. My phone stayed in my purse. There was no rush. Just a cup, a chair, and a whole hour that belonged to me and no one else. They always say this part of your life is supposed to be quiet. They just don't tell you how loud the peace can be. Lorraine Campbell lived 2 houses down, had since 1972. She and I weren't the kind of women you'd call best friends, but we'd shared enough tea and knowing looks over the fence that we had our own way of talking. She knocked around 5, holding a tin of lemon cookies and her usual brand of friendly nosiness. "I saw Brandon's car here yesterday," she said the minute I opened the door. "Did he bring flowers or just excuses?" "Neither," I said, moving aside so she could come in. "He brought his wife in a threat." "Oh?" she said, and that one word was dripping with judgment. We sat down in the living room. I poured the tea chamomile for her, strong black for me. She set the tin on the coffee table between us but didn't open it yet. She was waiting. So I told her I did it. I told them they're all out of the will. I said Tyler's the only one who ever showed up without me having to ask. Lorraine just let out a long sigh. "About damn time." I just stared at her. "I'm sorry, May," she said, her voice softening, "but I've watched you kill yourself for their approval for years. Babysitting when you had your own doctor's appointments, writing checks while they took vacations, smiling when they'd forget your birthday. I always thought one day she's gonna snap. Thank God you finally did." "I didn't snap," I said. "I just cut away everything that wasn't real love." Lorraine smiled. That's a better way to put it. We just sat there for a minute, quiet. All you could hear was the fridge humming and the wind blowing outside. You could feel fall setting in, the kind that smells like old leaves and feels like something's ending. "Do you regret it?" she finally asked. I shook my head. "I only regret not doing it sooner." She finally opened the tin. The shortbread was perfect. Crispy edges with sugar and all buttery and soft inside. We each took one and just chewed for a second. "You know," she said, "my niece tried to get me to sell this house last spring. Said it was too much for me. That I should move into one of those senior places near the lake. They do everything for you, Auntie." She said laundry meals, even group trips. "And what'd you say?" I said I'd rather die in a house full of my own chipped mugs and silence than in a place that smells like bleach and boredom. I actually laughed. A real laugh from deep down. Lorraine leaned in. "You and I were from a generation that knows what it means to just suck it up. We wore ourselves out, raising people who think love is about getting presents and gratitude is something you can skip." I just nodded. "You're not cruel, May," she added. "They're going to say you are, though. They'll whisper about how you cut off your own kids, but they won't mention that you were the one who saved them every single time, even when they never bothered to ask if you were drowning too." I blinked hard, trying not to cry. We talked for another hour about her garden, what's going on in the neighborhood, and the squirrels chewing up her gutter again. When she left, I hugged her a little longer than I usually do. That night, I didn't even turn on the TV. I pulled out an old letter Robert wrote me on his first business trip. It was tucked in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. May this house is never empty with you in it. You're the roof, the floors, and the lock on the door. Even when it feels like nobody sees you, I do. I read it 3 times before I put it back in the envelope. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Not anymore. It started with just a walk, a simple, normal thing. But for me, it was the first one I took for no one but myself. Not to get prescriptions, not to drop off a casserole, not to return some dish I never even asked for. I just wanted to walk. The morning was crisp, not cold. The kind of air that feels good in your lungs but doesn't sting. I put on Robert's old windbreaker. It was a size too big with frayed cuffs, but its weight felt weirdly comforting. I walked slowly through the neighborhood, not like I was exercising, but like I was remembering what was still mine. The Mapletons' house still had those same blue shutters. The Wilsons' porch swing still creaked, just like when Robert used to say, "We should fix ours before that thing finally falls." He never did. Neither did they. At the park, I sat on a bench under that old elm tree, the one that split in a storm way back in '99. It still had a slight lean to it, stubborn and alive. Across the path, a couple of young moms were pushing strollers, talking about sleep training in preschool. They didn't even look my way, and I didn't care. I wasn't in their world anymore. I didn't want to be. A woman sat down on the other end of my bench. She was probably in her 40s. She had that tired but still going look I remember from my own middle years. The kind of woman who makes 5 lists a day but forgets why she walked into the kitchen. We sat there in silence for a few minutes. Then she said, without looking at me, "You come here a lot." "I used to," I said. "Back when people needed rides and someone to bring over a casserole." She laughed a little. "That sounds nice. We didn't trade names. We didn't need to." "I'm just here to clear my head," she said. "My daughter told me yesterday she doesn't think she wants kids. Said she's not sure she sees the point." I raised my eyebrows. "What did you say?" I told her I didn't see the point of her 5 tattoos, but I kept that part to myself. I smiled. "You didn't really keep it to yourself, though, did you?" She laughed again, a real laugh this time. "No, I didn't." We talked for about 15 minutes about nothing and everything. She left first, giving a little wave. I watched her disappear around the bend, and I felt something strange. It was like a small crack in a door that's been frozen shut in my chest. That night, I made a real dinner just for me. Not fast food, not leftovers. A full meal. I set the table, used the good plates, and lit a candle. I had the radio playing softly in the background. It was the same station Robert liked, even if it's more talk than music now. And I ate alone. Not lonely, but alone. There's a big difference. Afterwards, I went into the den and just looked around. The room was always Robert's space. His papers, his books, his half-finished crossword puzzles. I hadn't touched much since he died, but tonight I did. I dusted, opened the windows, and aired the place out. Then I sat at his desk and wrote a note to myself, just a few lines. "You're not invisible. You're not a burden. You don't have to run yourself into the ground to find some peace." I folded the paper and stuck it in the drawer next to his last crossword. It was half done. The answer for 14 down was still blank. The clue was end of one chapter, start of another. I didn't need to know the answer. I was already living it. The envelope had his handwriting on it. I knew it instantly, the way it slanted. Those careful block letters with the spacing all off. Tyler always pressed way too hard with his pen. Like the words wouldn't count unless they left a dent. It showed up 3 days after our talk. It was stuck between a credit card offer and a grocery ad. I brought it in, put it on the kitchen counter, and just stared at it while the kettle boiled. I didn't open it right then. I let it sit there like how I used to leave my birthday cards on the mantel until after dinner, just to drag out the surprise. When my tea was ready, I sat down and finally opened the envelope. "Dear Grandma, I wanted to write this instead of just texting you. I know I could have said this last time I saw you, but I was still trying to find the right words. And now, after thinking about it for a few days, I realize there are no perfect words. So I'll just be honest. Thank you. Not just for the trust fund, the house, or the cabin, though I know that's a huge deal, but for something else. For being the one person in this family who never tried to make me be anything other than myself. You always made me feel like I belonged, even when my parents were pushing me to be more polished, more ambitious, more, strategic. You were never strategic. You were just you. I didn't know Grandpa was sick. I didn't know he died. I still don't really know how to wrap my head around it. And I'm sorry. I would have been there. You know I would have, and I'm so mad at Mom for not telling me, for just deciding it wasn't important. I don't know why you chose me, but I promise I won't waste this. I'm not going to let you down. I want to take care of this house, Grandma. I want to learn about what you and Grandpa built together. I want to understand the kind of strength it takes to always be there when nobody else is. I love you. I don't say that nearly enough, but I really do. I always have. I read it 3 times. The first time my eyes were dry. The second I had my hand on my heart. The third time tears were just rolling down my face. Then I put the letter on the mantle and just stood there like it was something holy. Because in our family, letters like that were a rare thing. Not because there was no love, but because nobody ever said it out loud. It was just assumed and stretched thin. I didn't need the money I'd put away. Not anymore. But I needed this. I needed to know that something I did all that quiet time and care I gave hadn't been completely swallowed up by ungrateful kids and fake holidays. That night, I sat in Robert's chair and watched the shadows stretch across the floor as the sun went down. Tyler was the kind of man Robert would have really respected. He wasn't loud or pushy, just steady, curious, and present. That last one mattered more than anything else now. Just being present. Not just showing up, but really seeing people. I knew he wouldn't break my trust, not because of the money, but because he knew exactly what it felt like to be forgotten. And people like that don't just let things fall apart. He'd build something with it. He'd remember. I closed my eyes and listened to the house creak as it got colder, wood shifting, settling. It was a sound that used to make me feel so alone. Now it sounded like life was just going on like a whisper from the past. My evenings were different now. No more calls from Ashley asking if I could just swing by the school and grab Tyler. Not because she needed my help, but because her yoga class ran late. No more texts from Brandon asking if I could cover a surprise car repair. It was never a real emergency, but it was always just enough to keep me on edge. The quiet felt good for a change. That night I just sat one place at the table. It wasn't because I was lonely. It was because I finally got what it means to eat for yourself, not just be fed. I made a roast chicken. A real one, not from the freezer. And not zapped in the microwave. Made some potatoes, too. I even used rosemary from the garden Robert planted way back when our weekends were about fun, not just chores. I lit a candle. Didn't need to, but I wanted to. About halfway through my meal, the house was so quiet I could hear that old clock ticking down the hall. I remembered that clock. It was from the first apartment Robert and I ever had. It sounded so loud back then, lying awake with no money, no insurance, really no plan at all except for each other. He used to say, "We'll build something even if it takes time." And it did, and it was great. After dinner, I took my time washing the dishes. I wasn't rushing or trying to do 10 things at once. I wasn't worried about who needed the kitchen after me. I dried every single one, put them away, and then I did something I haven't done in years. I danced, not for long and not very well, but I did it. I put on the old record player, the one Robert tried to fix 100 times before he finally gave up and said the scratches gave it character. You know, he was right. It skipped on every third line, but I still knew all the words. I just danced right there in the living room barefoot. I put my arms up a little. My body felt stiff in ways I'd never noticed before. My knees were quick to remind me I'm 79, but in my heart I felt like I was 20 again. I danced like no one was watching because for the first time, no one was. No one there to judge me or expect something from me. No one waiting for me to finish so they could hand me a problem or ask for a favor. It was just me, in my house, enjoying the quiet I'd earned. I only stopped when I saw the fireplace all cold and unused. There was still a layer of ash from the last winter Robert was here. I got on my knees and cleaned it all out. Sweeping out all the old stuff. It felt important, you know. Then I found a little note tucked in a basket of firewood I hadn't touched in ages. It was Robert's handwriting, short and sweet. Keep dancing even if it's just in the kitchen. The world will try to make you forget who you are. Don't let it. I just sat there, my hands all dusty, and I could feel the tears coming, but I didn't cry. He knew. Maybe he didn't know exactly what would happen, but he knew life would try to wear me down, try to make me smaller, quieter, always putting everyone else first. And he left me this little note like a sign to help me find my way back. I just sat on the rug for a bit, looking at the empty fireplace. But it's not empty, I thought. It's just waiting. Later that night, I cracked my bedroom window open, just enough to let that fall air come in. You know, the kind that smells like old leaves, but fresh and clean underneath. I got under the quilt I made back in '84. Back when Robert worked late, the kids were in school, and I thought being worn out was a good thing. I know better now. I know being at peace is what really matters. I was tired, but it was a different kind of tired. It wasn't that old feeling when the weight of everyone else's problems felt like it was part of my own bones. This was a good kind of tired, the kind you earn. It's what you feel when you take something back, Not a kingdom, not revenge, just your name. My name. I wasn't expecting her. So when I opened the door and saw Meredith standing there, all alone, no car in sight, no Brandon trailing behind with some rehearsed apology, I just felt this weird calm. She was holding a pie, a cheap one from the store. I just raised an eyebrow. She gave me a nervous little smile. "It's apple." I stepped aside. Not because I was being nice, not because I had to, just because I was curious. She walked in like she'd been here before, but never really saw the place. Her eyes scanned the hallway, the pictures, the coat rack Robert built back in 1981. The same one Brandon broke when he was a kid and lied about. Robert never fixed it. He said it was part of our story now. Meredith just stood awkwardly in the kitchen. I didn't offer her tea, didn't tell her to sit. I let the silence do its job. Finally, she said, "I didn't come to ask for anything. I heard what happened, what you told Brandon about the trust, the house, everything." "Good," I just nodded. "I know you probably don't believe me," she went on, twisting her hands. "But I wanted to say thank you." That threw me for a loop. "For what exactly?" "For not giving it to Brandon." She looked up, and for the first time since I've known her, I saw something real in her eyes, not fake, not planned. Brandon never learned how to stand on his own 2 feet. She said he grew up with everything just handed to him. I tried to keep that act going, but she stopped, her eyes getting watery. "You enabling him didn't help, but neither did I. And now it's just who he is." I didn't say a word. She kept going. "I know he blames you and Ashley blames you, but they never say that you were the one holding this all together while they just complained." I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. "So why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm tired too," she whispered. We just stood there in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Nobody moved. The pie sat on the counter between us. She finally sat. "I want you to know I admired Robert," she said. "He was kind to me even when he didn't have to be. And I know I never thanked you for everything you did. For the help, the money, the babysitting. For always being there. Yeah, I just watched her. You didn't owe me a thing." "Thanks," I said. "But you owed him. You should have been there when he died and you weren't." She looked down. "I know." It didn't feel good saying it. It was just the truth, plain and simple. She reached into her purse, not to leave, but she pulled something out. A small photo worn around the edges. It was a picture of Tyler, maybe 5 years old, sitting on the swing in my backyard. I'd taken that photo on a Sunday. Meredith must have saved it from a Christmas card I sent years ago. "He loves you," she said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. "I hope someday he loves someone like that," she added, "and I hope he knows how rare that is." She stood up, then fixed her coat. "I won't take up any more of your time," she said, "but I wanted to say it before the story gets twisted. Before they make you the villain in their version of it." She walked to the door and opened it herself. The wind just grabbed her scarf. For a second, she looked younger, like all the hardness was gone, just a woman who'd spent her whole life giving everything to people who never even saw it. She stopped in the doorway. "Don't let them take what's yours, Mapa," she said. "They've already taken enough." And then she was gone. I just stood there for a while before I put the pie in the fridge. It wasn't about feelings or anything. I just figured it'd be good with tea tomorrow. A week later, I got a letter from the lawyer. It wasn't an emergency, just a confirmation. The new papers were filed. The trust was officially active. Tyler's name was now on every deed, every account, every single line where Brandon and Ashley's names used to be. It felt quiet. I didn't feel like I'd won. It wasn't some big drama. It just felt settled, like something was finally finished. I took the envelope out to the garden. The roses had finally died in the cold. Robert used to say they went out gracefully. I always liked that. Now I finally understood what he meant. There's a way to let things go without it feeling like you lost. I sat on the bench, just running my fingers over the envelope. It was real now, all of it. This wasn't just some decision I'd made out of grief or anger. It had settled into me, into the house, into the garden. I'd done what had to be done. And weirdly, I felt something else too. Not relief, not pride, but permission. Permission to start over, even if it was just with the little things. That afternoon, I got out my sewing machine. It had been packed away since before Robert got sick. I cleared off the table, oiled the wheel, and threaded the bobbin with that same quiet care my mother taught me. I didn't need to make anything important. I just wanted to hear that hum again, that steady working sound that reminded me of women who just keep going, no matter what they're carrying. I made new curtains for the kitchen. They didn't match a thing. They were bright blue with messy white stitches, but they were mine. The next morning, I got up early and made pancakes. The real kind from scratch, not a box mix. I set 2 plates on the table. I knew Tyler would come. He always does what he says he'll do. He got here just after 9 with a bag of groceries I didn't ask for. Just thought you could use something fresh, he said. I smiled. You want to learn how to make them today? Yeah, he said. I do. So we cooked together. I showed him the trick for flipping them so they don't tear, how to test the pan with a drop of water, and how to fold the batter so you don't lose the air. He listened. He really listened. Not like Brandon used to, always impatient, always looking for a shortcut. You're good at this, he said, taking a bite of the first one. I've had time to practice, I said. He poured on more syrup and grinned. You know, I think this place could really be something. I looked at him. The house, he said. I don't just mean keeping it. I mean using it. Maybe for other people, like a place for someone who has nowhere to go. Or even a little garden workshop. You could teach people things. I felt something open up inside me that I didn't expect. Hope, not the loud, desperate kind, the quiet, patient kind. I think your grandfather would have liked that, I said. He nodded. Maybe I'll start with the porch. It needs fixing. I told him, you'll need real tools, not that cheap stuff they sell college kids in a plastic box. He laughed. Guess you'll have to teach me that too, he said. We finished our food in a comfortable silence. After he left, I stood at the sink doing the dishes. The window was open and the new curtains were swaying a little. The wind smelled like dry leaves and something kind of sweet. Maybe it was cinnamon, or maybe it was just a memory. I looked out at the yard. The roses were done for the year. The bench was cold. The trees were bare, but they stood straight, and for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel that weight pushing me down. Just the idea of what was coming next, something Tyler was going to build, something I'd finally cleared the space for. The first snow started to fall real light, just a dusting of white across the yard, the kind that doesn't stick yet. But it tells you the season's really changed. I watched from the back porch, wrapped up in my thick sweater with a coffee in my hand. Tyler was out front using a little level on the steps, mumbling to himself, just like Robert used to when he worked. It had been a month since I signed the papers. The world didn't throw a party. The sky didn't part. But something inside me had shifted. A weight I'd carried for decades was finally lifted, and what took its place wasn't anger or victory. It was just space. I had made room for something new. The kids still hadn't called. Ashley sent one text. I hope you're proud of what you've done. I didn't write back. Brandon's silence was longer, deeper, an empty space I didn't need to fill anymore. I didn't chase after them. Let them tell their side of it. Let them paint me as the cold one. I've lived long enough to know that people will always twist the truth to make themselves feel better. But I knew what happened. I knew what I gave. And I knew what I finally took back for myself. The truth doesn't need to yell. It just needs to exist. Tyler knocked on the back door. Grandma, you want to see the new railing? I put down my mug and followed him out. He'd done a good job, sanded it, stained it, and sealed it from the weather. The porch, for the first time in years, looked like somebody cared about it again. Robert would have said it leans a little to the left, I said with a smile. Tyler grinned. So does everyone in this family. I laughed a real loud laugh, a laugh that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was open. He stood next to me, wiping his hands on a rag. I was thinking maybe next spring we could start a little garden out front. Not just flowers, vegetables, herbs, something that grows. I looked at him, and I didn't just see the boy I used to tuck in. I saw the man who had decided to show up for me. That sounds just right. We went inside. The cold was really starting to bite. I made soup. He fixed the squeaky cabinet door. I showed him where the breaker box was. He asked about the insulation in the attic. We filled the day with the small necessary jobs that make up a life. Not the kind of things you take pictures of, but the kind of things you miss when they're not there. That night, after he left, I wrote one more letter. Not for a court, not for lawyers. It was for myself, to the woman I used to be. You tried longer than you ever should have. You bent yourself into shapes that just didn't fit. You spoke softly when you should have stood up for yourself. You gave in when you should have said no, but you also loved with everything you had. And that wasn't a mistake. Now you're free. Free to just dance in the kitchen. To plant something, just to watch it grow. To say no, without feeling guilty. To say yes, without being afraid. To give when it's earned, not demanded. You're not cruel. You're not bitter. You're clear. And finally, that's enough. I folded that letter and put it in the same drawer where I used to keep the old family photos, not to hide it, but just so I'd know it was there. Like a lighthouse I'd built myself. Before bed, I went outside one last time. The stars were sharp and the air felt colder. I looked up at the sky and just whispered. He would have been proud, not of my decision, not even for being strong, but because I finally chose peace. It wasn't loud or showy, it was just mine. So here's what I'll leave you with if you've listened this far. If you have your own silences, your own painful rooms, your own unspoken rules, don't wait for someone to hand you peace. Choose it yourself. Don't mix up love with obligation. Don't ever confuse duty with your own self-worth. And if your house is full of noise but nobody's listening, make a new kind of quiet one where you're not invisible anymore. One where you don't have to disappear just to feel safe. If this story hit home for you, share it. Tell somebody, or just hold it close and know it's never too late to come back to yourself. Follow for more stories like this. Leave a comment if any of this felt familiar, or just sit with it for a bit. I promise